everybody to our new parent education webinar series. We are very excited to be bringing you these programs. We would prefer, of course, to be seeing your smiling faces in an auditorium or community space, but for now, this is what we have. And actually, we're really enjoying these webinar presentations. We feel like we're reaching lots of people, and we're very fortunate to have presenters like Ana Homayoun today, who's been generous enough to join us and just sign in and help us out. So again, very excited to be here. Welcome, everybody. In terms of the format today, we're going to have Ana speak for about 20 minutes, and then we will be opening it up to questions from you, the audience. I have a few questions from parents that I've been speaking with, and then feel free, please, to use the button on the bottom of your Zoom screen that says Q&A, and you type those questions in, and we will be watching them and asking them as they come in. So let me tell you a little bit about our presenter today. Ana Homayoun is a noted author, educator, and school consultant. She is a frequent local and national presenter on topics related to executive functioning, student engagement, motivation, and overall wellness. Ana is the founder of Green Ivy Educational Consulting, an organization that empowers students to develop executive functioning skills, organizing, planning, prioritizing, and regrouping needed to thrive inside and outside the classroom, or as we're going to be talking about today, in your living room or their bedroom. She has been quoted or featured in publications including the New York Times, Washington Post, Atlantic Magazine, CNBC, San Francisco Chronicle, ABC News, and NPR. In addition, Ana is the author of 3 books, including That Crumpled Paper Was Due Last Week, The Myth of the Perfect Girl, and most recently, Social Media Wellness, Helping Tweens and Teens Thrive in an Unbalanced Digital World. Please join me from wherever you are in a big welcome for Ana Homayoun.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Charlene, and the Parent Education Series. So welcome. I wanted to quickly go through basically some of the strategies that we've been working with students, and what are some things that you can do at home to navigate this time that's been, just so different for all of us. So first things first, though, how are your children feeling, right? This time is really unusual for a lot of different reasons. We have canceled activities, canceled opportunities to see friends. And the thing that kids have been telling me that they missed most is the structure and the socialization pieces of school, right? So even if they didn't love school before, the fact that there was a routine and the fact that they were able to go somewhere every day was actually really important to them. And so, yesterday in the New York Times, there was an article that was published asking students around the country what they missed. And one kid said, I can't believe I'm even saying this, but I miss school. And what we want to do really is, first and foremost, make sure our kids are socially, emotionally healthy and they are feeling mentally well. So some of the strategies that I'm going to give you, I want you to, in the background, think, this might work 3 days out of 4, but the 4th day, you might just have to say, you know what, it's, 4 o'clock on a Tuesday or 10 a.m. on a Tuesday, and we're just going to take the day off, right? And maybe if you can sit outdoors or do something that I will talk about, this idea of an emotional toolbox is really helpful for students. So I know in the district, they are doing asynchronous learning. And what that means for students is that they get all of their materials and that they have to complete the work on their own in their own time block. They may have office hours with teachers. Every teacher does things differently, or an opportunity to interact with students, teachers, but they have to complete the tasks on their own. So the first thing that I would say is, what are the things that you can do to help them come up with a to-do list at the beginning of the week? And for middle school and high school students, the big thing to remember is that you as a parent don't have to do a lot of this, but you may, especially right now, need to create the time, the structure, and the space. And remember that academic work right now, when you think about a school day, you get to school, you walk through the halls, you see your friends, that's not happening. So the actual academic work really shouldn't, for a middle school or high school student, take more than 2, 3, 4 hours a day max. But really 2 or 3 hours of concentrated work can get it done. So when I work with students in our office, so we've now worked with over 100 kids, students at 16 different public and private schools throughout the country. And we're seeing a lot of students do the asynchronous model. And what we're doing with them is on Monday, we help them download and figure out all the things they have to do for the week and put it in one place. So we would usually use a planner. And for some kids, we're creating this online system, like even a Google Doc you can use, and have them do a brain dump and have them identify what are the things that need to get done that are must-dos, what are the things that they might like to do, and what are the things that they want to have time to do. So get that in the beginning of the week. And then when you think about it, having them navigate each of their days with a looser schedule that really just focuses on movement, work, and rest. And when I worked with students for the book, That Crumpled Paper was due last week, all about disorganized and distracted boys, the biggest thing I always said is, A, it's always about attitude and approach and getting their buy-in by making it all about them. And then also when they have free time, it's their free time, right? Let them do what they want. And the goal here is to let students in this time of transition, in this pandemic time, really feel as though they have a sense of autonomy or choices in how and when they spend their time, that they're competent to make good choices, because that also decreases their anxiety. I have choices and I'm competent to make good choices. And then also making sure they have a sense of relatedness and belonging. And what we mean by that is, how can they connect with people that are important to them or feel connected in a way, even if they can't see people. So when I think about how we navigate this week, like a weekly thing, and what we've been doing with our students is, at the beginning of the week, as I said, we help them create this list. We give them the time and space. Maybe we assist, maybe we ask open-ended questions. And maybe you as a parent, if you know your child's dynamic, aren't the right person to have this conversation. Maybe there's an aunt they can FaceTime. Maybe there's a cousin. Maybe there's somebody else in the household. So really understand who is the right person to have this conversation. At all costs, we're at home all the time right now. So you want to make sure that your parent-child relationship is number one, that you feel like if all else is going to cause you strain and stress, then just put it aside for now. Because bigger picture, really, we know that we're out of school for the rest of the year, at least here in California. And so what you want to think of is not, what does my kid need to know this week or next week? What do they need to know before next September, right? And when you think about it that way, it eases off the anxiety that if you have a day that doesn't go well, or a week that just, is just overwhelming for everybody, that you can just take time to just like de-stress. The other thing to think about when I think about the day is, a lot of times when students move in the morning before they sit down to get any work done, it helps them get that concentrated work done more effectively. So we say, get outside if you're able to, if that's possible for you, or do some form of fun movement. I use the free app, the 7-minute workout, where they can do like wall sits or like lunges or all these things, or jumping jacks, whatever. You can make it a family affair. You can make it really fun in some ways. You can use a timer. And then what they have is like 2 hours of concentrated work in the middle of the day. So 25 minutes on, 5 minutes off. And what I've found for some of my students is having that concentrated amount of time is really helpful. But I've also found that for some of them, it's really hard to get started. So they may need to sit at a kitchen table with a parent next to them, or they may need to just identify what are the 1 to 3 things that I need to get done today to consider it a win. So taking off that like list from the beginning of the week, if every day you have them identify what are the 1 to 3 things I need to get done or I want to get done to consider this a win. And then after that, free time is free time, right? They're dealing with so much disappointment that I know there have been parents that have asked me, well, what about excessive screen time? I'm like, how many parents have been binge watching Netflix or, spending a little bit more time on screens or on the news that we normally wouldn't be? So we have to also adjust our expectations for our kids right now. The number one concern is really safety. So But for kids, allowing them to have the time and space and structure to have some sort of routine also makes them feel safe. So that's one thing to really think about. And understand as a parent that this is a somewhat impossible task. If you have a job outside of the home that you're still trying to maintain, and you're parenting, and there's remote learning going on, those all can't happen at once. So it's okay for some things to just go by the wayside for this day, this week. But if you can help your kid identify what are 1 to 3 tasks that they can get done every day that will make them feel like a win, it also helps them feel as though they have control in a time that things seem to be always changing. One of the questions I always ask kids, and I think it's really helpful right now, is, are you doing the best you can with what you've got right now? And the question is really freeing, because it's not, are you doing the best you can? Are you getting straight A's? Could you be doing better? It's like, with what's going on right now, are you doing your personal best? Like, what are the habits that you want to put in place that make you feel less stressed, that make you feel less overwhelmed? And I use this term emotional toolbox because what we work with students on in our office is having them identify 5 things that help them de-stress. So it could be taking a bath, walking the dog, shooting some hoops outside if that's an option, drawing, reading. When I give presentations at school, kids have all of these ideas, and most of them are actually things we can still do, right? Drawing, reading, all of those things are still things we can do. So have them identify what are 5 things that help you decrease your anxiety. And then help them identify who are 2 or 3 adults who I say are clarifiers, and then peers who are supporters, right? And you can still connect with them via FaceTime, via Zoom, all of those things. So thinking about having them identify who are the people, places, and things that I still have the opportunity to network with and engage with, even in a time where I might not be able to leave my home or do the same things. And when you think about that, combined with the fact of we're looking at this as a 4-month thing, in that kids are going back to school in August and September. If you have an elementary school student, it's good to say, hey, in the 5th grade, my child needs to know, going into 5th grade, it's important for them to know this around math, this around writing skills, this around reading skills. What are ways that you can do different things in the home, or have them choose and decide better off? Have them identify what are some things that they want to explore? What are some things they want to look at, especially if you have elementary school students? If it's overwhelming to do remote learning right now, then put it aside, right? And figure out, okay, what are the things my child needs to know in terms of skills? What are the many ways that they can explore that in a way that's not stressful, that doesn't create a lot of anxiety or overwhelm in our house? We just have to be flexible in that way. We have to understand that that is sort of what works best in this moment, and we're in the most unusual moment, right? This isn't going to last forever. It's a moment of time, and understanding that and being okay with the fact that, you know what, there's just some things that are changing day to day, and we're going to navigate that. So the other piece to think about is, as you're looking at a daily schedule, having them do this work block in the time that they're the most able to be focused, and having them navigate out and manage their distractions. So it's so easy because everything is online now. So much of social media wellness, my latest book was what happens when we bring technology into the classroom. And a lot of it applies right now. What happens when kids, all of their work is on technology? So what I want you to help them think about, and you can think about this for yourself, and again, parental modeling here is really important, is what can you do to help them manage out their distractions so that when they're doing their work, they do their work? Because we know that it takes 5 to 20 minutes to get back on track when you're distracted, right? You think about the vacation you were supposed to be on if spring break is around the corner or something like that. Then you go to a website talking about that, and then 20 minutes goes by. Same is true for kids. So when I work with kids, I have them create dual screens, one for just work stuff. So they're signed out or they use web blockers. Like if YouTube is distracting for them, they use a web blocker, and you can time out these web blockers so that they're like from 12 to 4 every day, for example, right? And then they have a social screen, and on the social screen, you know, they're signed into whatever is their social stuff. And so during that block of time, say it's 2 hours and 25-minute blocks of no distraction work, they just work on those 2 to 3 tasks that they've identified are key. And the thing to think about is a lot of times we say, well, after 25 minutes, they get up and walk around. Ideally, sure. But if they feel like they're really focused on something, then they can keep working, right? Especially if you have a kid who really gets into something, great. I often, with younger kids, what I've found has worked in my conversations with parents around the country, you know, those who have elementary school students, is create kind of a camp director approach. And you can use some version of this with middle school and high school students, where you start the day with something required and you end the day with something required that is offline and with them. Maybe it's a reading thing, maybe it's breakfast together, maybe it's dinner together. And then the middle of the day is kind of loose, right? They have to get 3 tasks done or whatever, but the rest is really up to them, right? And they have lots of choices. And for younger kids, you can help them come up with 8 to 10 things that they have to do. One of them could be chores. One of them could be the iPad. One of them could be exercise or science or math or English. So you have them then decide, okay, well, I have to do these 8 things sometime during the day. And some of them are play-based. Let me identify what I'm going to do right now. I'll do it for 25 minutes. If I want to continue, then I have a longer period of time. And it buys parents some time too, that they don't feel like they constantly have to be figuring things out. So the goal here, really bigger picture, is helping kids identify where and how they have autonomy and choice. And so identifying things every day, identifying things for the week, helps them navigate this new time and space. And then just creating a block of time every day rather than just keep doing your work or trying to do your work and making that an 8-hour thing. Because quite frankly, it doesn't need to be an 8-hour thing. It shouldn't be an 8-hour thing. So many kids are dealing with, and adults are, the feelings of overwhelm and grief from the things that are lost right now, that the more we can just concentrate that concentrated amount of work and then allow for more things that we might not have had time for before, right? So many of my kids have come up with hobbies that they're now pursuing, whether that's music, whether that's learning a language, whether that's cooking or baking, or just stuff that they couldn't do because they had after school activities before. That if that's how they want to spend their time and space, that's also a learning opportunity that should be valued just as much as getting their, subject work done. Now, for high school students, the other piece to think about is they really need to know the content for next year. And that's true for all students, but particularly for students, if you're taking algebra, geometry, algebra 2, pre-calculus, it's a building block for next year and for college. Like my college chemistry course was really 100% based off what I took in high school chemistry. So again, it doesn't all have to happen today, but let's think about longer term. What is the things we need to know for September? What are the things for students that are in this school district that's gone, past no credit? What do they need to do to pass? What do they need to know to feel like they've mastered the material? So even if there's not a test and quiz, they still have to content. And so what can you do on a daily basis? And then really just loosen up the rest of it, right? Like the screen time question that I get a lot, people are like, well, what do you think about in terms of screen time? And it hasn't changed, right? I think about healthy socialization, so helping kids opt into experiences online and in real life that are energizing, and opt out of things that are draining and overwhelming. That includes the news. I don't think kids should be on the news all the time. I think it's overwhelming for us adults. So helping them identify, what is energizing? Let me opt into that. And then effective self-regulation. So again, that's about self. So them understanding. What I found for a lot of kids that I've been interviewing, like the teenagers, they're like, we're realizing how we don't want to be on screens all the time. It's now it's like a thing that we have to do for work, and we just want to spend the rest of our time outdoors. And so kids are coming to these realizations. And then finally, I really think we also need to focus on overall safety. So social, emotional, physical safety, we always talk about. But we know that kids are using different apps now. We know that there's data and privacy issues. So keeping that in the front of mind as well, especially as so much of our lives are online, it's really important. So having them identify, I want to download this app. Okay, so do some research on that app. Thinking about those pieces as well, because so much of what we're doing is getting all of this new stuff at once. So I've gone over my basic overview, and now I'm really happy to answer some questions. So Charlene's going to come back and join me, and we're going to do a little bit of Q&A. There she is.
Well, thank you, Ana. That was a lot of good information. I want to reconfirm for everybody that this event is being recorded. Thank you, Zoom, for making that so easy. And so very shortly, we'll have this video available for those of you who'd like to show it to a spouse, maybe even your kids, maybe your sister who lives in Arizona, something like that. So again, I took the time last night to listen to the board meeting via Zoom where they were talking about grading in the Sequoia Union High School District. And Ana, not surprisingly, one of our first questions has to do with that. A viewer asks, now that Sequoia Union High School District has chosen pass, no pass for grading this semester, how do you recommend keeping my high achieving child motivated? That decision strikes us as very demoralizing.
It's a great question. And I think that there are so many things that go into those decisions at different school districts. So I've been seeing this across the country. I think the biggest thing to help students identify is what are things that are important for them to learn for themselves, right? And this is this opportunity for us to move from like external validation to intrinsic motivation in our world, because kids now have this time and space. We kept talking about resilience and intrinsic motivation, right? We have parenting people that talk about that all the time, and now we really have this opportunity. And so having them identify, well, what are the things that you are interested in this time and space that you won't have this uncharted territory. There's all this things that you can look up online and self-discover and self-explore. There is a lot more access now available. A lot of things that used to have a paywall are now free. New York Times is free for all high school students through July. Thinking about it in that way of helping them almost design an independent study. I think that's a great way for a high achieving student to feel as though this is my opportunity to be part of a conversation in some way in this time that things have sort of felt like they've been taken away from me. The other thing, though, I also say is, how can they be helpful? Even within their home or within their community, in a way that's safe and responsible and all of those things. So I'm not telling kids to go out and do anything right now, really, but how can they be a member of their community or their home community in a positive way? That's another thing to think about. So for example, there's a high school student from Virginia that I know that has offered to help his neighbors who have younger children, he's in high school, tutor them in math and English virtually, because he knows that the parents could use a break for an hour and not have to do the remote learning. So what are the things that we can be a part of creating solutions? And I think for a high achieving student, they want to know that they're contributing in some way, and they want to be part of solutions, and that also helps them get autonomy in a positive way.
Okay, thank you, Ana. Really good suggestions. Here is another question that I know lots of parents are dealing with, especially right now during distance learning. She asks, if given the choice, my middle school child would go from the TV to the iPad, Minecraft, Madden Mobile, etc., to FaceTime with friends. He enjoys playing basketball and playing games with us, but getting him out to the corner basketball hoop is difficult. I'm worried about too much screen time.
It's a great question. So screen time is obviously changed in the last few weeks, last month. There was a great article, Dr. Jenny Radisky, who talks a lot about screen time as well. She's a pediatrician. I believe she is a pediatrician, but she talks about the idea of knowing your child, knowing the content, and knowing the context. And I'm going to use that example for right now. Two things to think about. FaceTiming your grandparent isn't the same as playing 4 hours of a video game. So the context is really important. If you're using the screen to communicate with a family member or a friend, I think that is really important right now. And I almost don't count that in screen time in some ways. I do for your eyes, right? You shouldn't be on, 8 hours of watching a screen. So that from a physical standpoint, but from an emotional and social standpoint, that's an engaging opportunity where it might have been in real life otherwise, but right now that's not an option. Now, back to the gaming piece and the nonstop. Some of that, I say, you're just going to have to relax the standards a little bit. But also what I say is back into digital detox. And what I mean by that is if you feel like you have a child who's going to have at it forever, then back in and choose your offline hours, right? So between 8 and 10 a.m., everyone is offline, right? And that means that you go outside, everybody does, and you do something. And what you'll find, and what I've found with other students, is that by 10 a.m., they've kind of found themselves busy with something else, so they're not rushing back to the videos. But if they are at some point, you just let it be. And then at the end of the day, whatever, it's like 5 to 7, that's dinner time and offline time. So you've built in 4 hours a day that are offline in some way, or 2 hours, or whatever you're going to do. And then the rest of it, you kind of have to relax the standards. But if we back into the digital detox opportunity, we make sure they're offline. And then if we say, okay, 8 to 10, everybody's outdoors, which means the corner basketball or whatever is available to you. Once you get them started, it's kind of like with work. If you get the first 25 minutes under your belt, and you make that required, you may find that they're going for a longer period of time. But that also makes it less stressful for you as a parent to be like, get off your phone, get off your computer all day, because that is just exhausting. And we sort of have to pick which, our battles at this point. We know we want to keep them safe and healthy. And if talking to their friends, especially for middle school and high school students, the socialization piece is so key. You ask any kid what they miss most of them will tell you it is not being able to see their friends, but not only that, not even being able to walk through the hallways and saying hi to somebody that you might not FaceTime with right now, but you knew them and like you like them, and the attendance person, and you do a high five with this teacher. Those are all missing. So we have to sort of figure out that, know your child, know the context, know the content. The other thing about your child too, though, is to also understand, and I used to use this a lot with social media wellness, is if their behavior is changing in a way that is worrisome, or if they're not taking, charge of personal hygiene, or if they become really angry, and surly, those are causes for concern. And there's also reasons around grief right now that could be the case. But relaxing the standards, because I honestly feel like overall screen time is not the first of our concerns at this moment.
Thank you, Ana. Your comments remind me of presenter Adina Glickman, who was on last week, and she showed us Maslow's hierarchy to remind us that when you're down at the bottom of the pyramid and you're really worried about safety and food and health, it's hard to concentrate on the big picture. So I think that trying to do a little bit of both, especially with our students, is important, but remember that safety and health piece is really the most critical right now. Okay, not surprisingly, based on last night's board decision, here's another question. My freshman in the Sequoia Union High School District is very disappointed about the change to pass no credit. How can she focus on learning and caring about learning now? I don't understand the board saying we don't really care, it's too hard to learn right now, which is a paraphrase of last night's discussion.
Well, I think, again, when we go back to all the research on intrinsic motivation, which is what we're really faced with right now, so many of us, even with the best of intentions, grades motivate, right? Grades get us going. And so one of the things to think about is, how do we then look at this as a moment for intrinsic motivation, right? You have a freshman, you know, high school was new. They do need to learn the content themselves to move on to sophomore year. The sophomore year classes, depending on what they're taking, all build off of freshman year. So this is an opportunity for you to step back and say, I know, and acknowledge and validate, right? Acknowledge and validate that it is a disappointment, and that is okay, and that there are a lot of disappointments right now, and that it's okay to be disappointed, right? So first things first. The second thing is, well, now what do you want to do about it, right? There are things you can control and things we are out of our control right now. And that's the decision that's been made. So what are the things that we can do to make sure that you're set up for next school year, right? So you know you need to complete this work on a weekly basis, right? And this might be an opportunity for them to develop study groups or do something with, you know, virtually with somebody outside the home to make the learning piece easier. And then also, what are the things that you had a hard time with first semester learning wise, right? Like if you were in geometry or algebra and there were parts that you didn't get, you need to know them for next year. So how can you use this as an opportunity to review? The key thing is, how can you get your child to feel as though they're in the driver's seat of their education right now and their learning experiences? And that it's not just about the homework, the tests, and the quizzes. It's about them being the person that is responsible for what they want to learn. So if they want to do a special independent study on something related to coronavirus issues, or if they want to study, you know, something around orangutans that they never had time for, this is the chance, right? All of these zoos and all of these other places are doing all these online classes for free. I mean, the thing is like I talked to my mom this morning, real true story, and she's a real estate agent. She became a real estate agent later in life. And so she's doing the time to do this refresher course she's always wanted to do. And she says, it's excellent. I'm learning all these new things. And that's what we want to model, like this opportunity to learn new things or reconnect with things that we may not have had time for, while still acknowledging and validating that, hey, this is a disappointment for a lot of reasons, but you still have control over a lot of things and you still have choices.
Thank you, Ana. I think you cannot overstate how important that point is about making sure that our kids have autonomy, choice, and voice, we call it, and this is really a good time to emphasize that. For some of you who may have joined us a couple minutes later, I also want to reconfirm or reaffirm Ana's point that at the beginning of the week, it's important, especially with your high school students, to do kind of a brain dump, as she says, and have them list the things that they need to do today, the things that need to get done during the week, and the things that they'd like to do. And then they can choose from those lists depending upon the time that they have and how they've structured their day. Okay, here's a question that everybody's asking. I know you've touched on this, Ana, but let's do it a little bit more. My kid, since the school closures, has not been very motivated to complete his online assignments because all he wants to do is be on the screens and play games.
So the big thing is, how do you compartmentalize or help him compartmentalize, depending on what grade he is in, right? Parents' role is really to provide time, structure, and space for kids to do work. So compartmentalize and understand that this work only really needs to get done in 2 to 3 hours a day, right? Like it doesn't need to take all day. And that's how you get buy-in. That's how I always get buy-in with kids. Like I'm like, I just want you from 10 to 1 to do work so that the rest of the day is yours. You want to cook, you want to explore, you want to spend time outdoors, you want to shoot hoops. Great. I want to help you get there. And then, so from 10 to 1, if that, you know, with the breaks, that's when they compartmentalize and do work. The piece that you have to think about is, how do you have them come up with the solutions and so that they get buy-in? And what I mean by that is, help them think, okay, so this is what I have to get done this week. How do you suppose that you get this done? Like, I'm going to leave some of this up to you. As long as these things are done, then whatever, you're able to also do these things, right? Whatever that looks like in your household. So have them identify what are the best ways for them to manage their distractions. Have them identify what the distractions are and what are their tools for doing that. So for example, one of my students' distractions is ESPN. So between 10 and 1, he uses a web blocker and he blocks out ESPN. And you know what? he actually asks for this because it helps him get his work done faster, so that by 1 o'clock, he's done. He's got the day to himself, you know, and in the morning from 9:30 to 10, you can also use that time as like sort of gather all your materials, right? Print everything out that you need, get everything in one place. So set a timer for 30 minutes where kids are just identifying, what are the 3 things I need to get done? What are all the materials I need to get that done? Let's get to the kitchen table. And then and the goal is to help them feel like, you know what, you now have a lot more time that you can now use to explore or spend time on things you like.
Really good advice, Anna. It makes me think about teachers really object to the term homeschooling. Anna and I have talked about this because it's not true. The teachers are still teaching.
Totally.
We parents feel like we're homeschooling, but really we're not supposed to be. We're supposed to be supervising our kids' school work. And I think that these tips that Anna is offering give you the chance to give the autonomy back to your kids. It's like the authors Ned Johnson and Bill Stixford of The Self-Driven Child say, I love you too much to fight with you about your homework. We're now in a whole situation where we can say to our kids, I love you too much to fight with you about your schoolwork. It's your schoolwork. Here's the opportunity for you to learn how to structure your day. So great advice. I know that's much easier said than done. And again, this leads us to the next question, which is really kind of perfect. I don't know how to answer this, Anna. If you could, we would all be much better off. How do you work with teens who resist all parental questions?
You outsource, truly. And I think that people did not fully understand in the beginning, and even now, that just because we're all at home doesn't mean you can't outsource virtually, right? And that means if you have a family friend or if there's somebody that you trust, I mean, that's why I do the work I do, right? Is because we know that the number one thing right now is parents having a good relationship with their kid and kids feeling safe and like that they feel like as comfortable as possible in this time within their family unit. So if that means that they're not going to listen to you, and honestly, it's natural for them not to listen to you. It's part of the developmental process. No kid thought that they were going to be stuck at home 24/7 with their family right now. So if again, I said, if there's a cousin, a cooler older cousin or an aunt or a grandparent that is a great person that they listen and connect to, that they can do over FaceTime. You know, I know a grandparent that's sort of so the parent has to be work conference calls and all this stuff. So for 2 hours a day, they just read the paper on FaceTime while the child's doing their work, and it actually works. So again, knowing who to outsource, that you can outsource. And yeah, it's true that not everybody has the bandwidth right now, but you probably, hopefully, have somebody in your life, or there are outside resources you can reach out to that can provide you that outsourced bandwidth. Right now, I think the best thing parents can do is figure out what can get outsourced that makes your life easier.
And Anna, what about students, especially girls? I know like to do this, my daughter used to, where they just want to be on the screen together just doing homework. They're not even talking to each other. We don't have a problem with that, do we?
No, those are certain things that fall under do what you need to do to get things done.
Okay, fair enough. All right. This is one that I think is really interesting, especially if you have a high achieving student. I am concerned, says this parent, that distance learning is not keeping my high achieving student excited or engaged with learning. Zoom is okay, but it's no substitute for AP classes. Do you have any advice? I want her to stay on track for college applications, and I'm really worried.
So it really depends on what year your student is. My advice would sort of differ by the year. There are materials available online to self-design, like a lot of the AP work. But again, I think a lot of this goes back to having this moment to create an independent sense of study and make it rigorous. Like there is so much, like if I spent 20 minutes with a kid, we could come up with a grand plan of things that they could research online, videos that they could watch. And I get that Zoom isn't as engaging as other things, but there also are like 3D sort of simulations that are over video. There's all sorts of things if they can come up with maybe just have them start listing 10 topics that they're interested in learning more about. Because even though the classes might not be rigorous right now because they have to sort of do it in a different model of delivery than they were expecting, right? So these are not online classes, because online classes are developed very differently. This is remote learning, right? What we're having right now. So what you want your child to say is, okay, so what can I now explore on my own, right? If I want a rigorous course of study, I can create that. There's a lot available online that I can adapt and learn on my own. I think this is this moment where we're really having this question that if you just were concentrated on what school gave you to learn, then you're missing out on the opportunity to be a learner. Like, there's so many kids who told me, I don't have time to read, right? When they were in school, I have so much work, I have after school activities, I don't have time to read for pleasure. Now you have time to read for pleasure. Now you have time to explore a new topic. And so I think there is no shortage of making things rigorous. It's just the opportunity to step back, and it doesn't mean that you have to get it from the school to create a rigorous course of study.
All right, thank you. Good point. Back, again, trying to give our kids as much autonomy that they can have so that we support that intrinsic motivation. So Ana, you see a lot of kids through Green Ivy Education Consulting that struggle with organization. Here's a parent who asks, my kids are having trouble staying organized with the work assigned by their teachers, packets, worksheets, some computer work. How can I help them short of just nagging? I know that you have some ideas for helping kids get organized both physically and perhaps with the materials that they have to use on the computer.
Yeah, so I think one of the big pieces is now that they're not having to carry things around, it can end up everywhere. So there's two pieces that you want to do. The physical piece is creating either a file folder or ideally a binder for each subject. And in it, you would have notes, homework, handouts, test quizzes. Because so much of this is also digital, you also want to create a file folder on their desktop or have them do that. And then put all the notes for classes, the handouts, any homework assignments, even after they've turned it in each of the folders for each subject. You also want to walk them through how to name file folders, because what they end up doing oftentimes is they'll just say math homework, and now we have a lot of math homework, and so you want to help them name the chapter, the lesson, and the date on every sort of file that they name, and then put them in the folders that are on their desktop. The other thing to think about is, how are they managing their week? So what I mean by that is, a lot of times now what we're doing, and we can actually provide this if there's a way to give this handout. We created a handout for our students where they can put like each of their classes, what they have to do for the week. And then if there's a Zoom call or like an office hour, the link for that. So it's all in one place. So we'll give you that handout too, because what kids have been finding is that things are all over the place, because one teacher has it in the school portal, one teacher has their own website, so some schools have things really like all in one place, really streamlined, and then others, and maybe, they have to go to different websites to get different things, are a lot more all over the place. So yesterday I was having a staff meeting with my staff, and one of my staff members said, we just spent 45 minutes getting everything from everywhere, and that helped the student, calm down enormously. And she said this was super helpful. So parents can do that too. And again, you might not be the right parent to be the messenger, or there might be an outsourced person. So you certainly don't, what works for one family or one student may not work for another. So make sure that you just get the resources that work for you. But the more that you can create the time and space that kids can do a brain dump of everything they have to do or want to do or need to get done, feel like they need to get done, and then have them also deprioritize what doesn't need to get done. I mean, one of the things I want to emphasize continuously is we are in this really unusual time. I don't know about you, but it takes me a lot longer to get things done. It takes me a lot. It feels like molasses in a lot of ways. Like it's just like slowly moving. And so it's the same for kids. So we've also got to give everybody a break. This is hard and it's a lot. And so, as I said at the very beginning, this might work 3 days out of 4, 4 days out of 5, and then you just have this day, and that's okay. And we have to recognize that and be okay with that and just give everybody a little bit of grace, a lot of grace.
Thank you, Ana. I think that is a really lovely piece of advice to end on. This is a really difficult time for everybody, parents and kids. And I think the best that we can do is support one another and really communicate. I mean, as Ana suggested, saying to your students, boy, we're so sorry that you're having to miss so many things. I can't imagine not being able to go to school, being able to go to prom, being able to go to graduation. So the empathy that we extend now will really pay off in the end. So again, thank you, Ana, for so much excellent advice today. You're all not with me, but I'm going to give her a big hand, and you can too at home. This video will be available online shortly. And again, thank you for your time today, and thank you all of you parents out there for joining us. I hope that this was helpful, and I love to hear from you all. So again, take care, stay safe, stay well, and we'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.